Alright, everybody. How's it going? It's me once again. Well, like I said in my last video, I said I wanted to do a video talking about the so-so films of the year. Now, these are movies that sort of are somewhere in the middle for me. They're not movies that I liked enough to put in my top 10, but they're also not good, or they're also not bad enough, I should say, to be on my worst of. These are movies that um, weren't awful, but they weren't great. They were just so-so. They were just somewhere in the middle. Um, Not enough to praise, not enough to rant on. Just kind of okay, decent. And these movies are not in any particular order. There's no list. It's just completely random. I've got them written down here on my computer. So let's get started. It's not a huge list. But the first one that I want to talk about is Act of Valor, which was a film released, I believe, a little bit earlier this year. It's a film I didn't get a chance to see in the theater. I wanted to, but I never got around to watching it. So I saw it at home on DVD. And if anyone out there wants to see it and you have Netflix, it's up on Netflix watching instantly right now. And Act of Valor, it's a very interesting movie because it doesn't star any actors. It stars real-life Navy SEALs, which was an interesting way to go. And the reason I was not a huge fan of this movie was because, well, even though I find it interesting that they didn't cast actual actors, that's also one of the faults of the movie. And not to say that the acting is bad, because they're essentially just doing what these guys would normally do. Going over procedures, going over, like, the missions and stuff like that. And in that aspect, they do fine. And that's really what the big chunk of the movie is. Now, when the trailer for this was released, many people were calling this Call of Duty the movie, and I wish I could say that's not necessarily the case, but it very much feels like Call of Duty the movie. In fact, there's several shots in this movie that are from the first-person perspective. So they'll be going into a room, and then it'll just cut to like a first-person shot of like a gun, as if you're playing Call of Duty, and it definitely has that Call of Duty feel. Well, at least the Modern Warfare series, and that's really what it feels like you're watching. It feels like you're watching a Call of Duty playthrough or an extended cutscene rather than an actual film. I mean, it's not like you dislike the characters. Now, I don't want to say anything wrong about any of the people involved in this film, because they are real-life Navy SEALs who sacrifice so much for our freedom, who sacrifice their friends, their families, all that stuff, just to fight for their countries. And I have nothing but the utmost respect for those guys who put their lives on the line every day. But like I said, this movie, it feels like you're just watching like that, like you're watching a Call of Duty playthrough or a Call of Duty cutscene. It just feels like that, and it really is. There is a plot. It's about them trying to stop a terrorist who's planning an attack on the United States, and they're trying to catch this one terrorist guy. And again, not really much. He's not really much of a villain, just sort of there. Your typical Muslim terrorist guy, and the movie is basically goes from trying to rescue someone to figuring out who the terrorist is, to figuring out what his plan is, where he's going to go, how do they stop him, and then it's just from point A to point B to point C. And you get a little bit of the emotional aspect of, losing, leaving their families behind and all that stuff. And, again, it's not that it's difficult to like these characters. I mean, just the fact that these are real-life Navy SEALs, I feel is enough to care about them, but there's really not a whole lot to their characters. It's just, where do we go, how do we get it done, and let's move on. But there are some things about this movie I really liked, which is why I consider it a so-so film. The action sequences, they're really well done when they're there. They're really solid. You get some practical explosions. It's rated R, so you get practical blood squibs. You get some really solid chase sequences. One involving this truck and this other truck one with the Navy SEALs, one with the terrorists, and you got somebody in the back shooting at it. You got missile RPGs. You got miniguns on boats down this river. Some sniper shots, and it's a very patriotic movie. It's definitely a movie that'll make you feel proud to be an American. But I feel like if you're gonna watch a movie like this, you probably would be better off watching a movie that is actually, I guess you'd say more like a movie like Saving Private Ryan is a much better film. Black Hawk Down is a much better film. Those are movies that I really enjoy. Those are war movies that I really like and really make you feel good to be an American. They're very patriotic films. But Act of Valor, I don't know. If maybe it would have been better if it had actual actors and maybe a little bit of a better script. Because again, the thing that really keeps you emotionally invested in these characters is the fact that these are real life guys. Which again is fine, but it's a little bit short of being a great movie. But it's still worth the watch. Like, out of all the movies I'm going to talk about, this is the one that I would say if I found it for a decent price, I'd probably pick it up, and it'd be a good time waster. I would say. I mean, it's still worth a watch. Like I said, you can watch it up on Netflix right now if you have that. But that's Act of Valor. Next up, it's actually a movie starring Mark Wahlberg. It's a movie that came out earlier this year, which was not as good as Ted, and that is Contraband. Now, again, Mark Wahlberg is not one of those actors that I hate, but he's also one of those actors that I love. He's kind of a mediocre actor. Like, I can tolerate him in certain things. It just depends on the movie, and it depends on the performance that he's able to portray. For instance, The Departed. I thought he was really good in The Departed. The Fighter. I really liked The Fighter. I thought that was a really solid, inspirational sports movie based on a true story. There's a ton of those out there, but I still thought it was a good movie, nonetheless. Three Kings, I thought he was good in Three Kings. The Other Guys, I really liked that one. And there's a bunch of others I could name off, but he's also been in a lot of shitty movies. But anyway, the point is, I can tolerate him in certain movies. Now, I thought he was fine in Contraband. Contraband, the reason that I can't say I don't like the movie, because really there's nothing about it that made me mad. Well, except one little thing at the end, which I'll get to. The thing about Contraband, it's a very typical movie. It's a movie that's been done a couple times before. I wanted to say 1,000,000 or 1,000, but that doesn't really make sense. It's been done a couple times before. I think the best comparison would probably be Gone in 60 Seconds. But this actually feels a little bit shorter than Gone in 60 Seconds. Basically, Mark Wahlberg's brother-in-law, he gets he's almost caught smuggling cocaine into the United States on this boat, but he has to dump it so that he doesn't go to jail. However, the person he promised the cocaine to, played by Giovanni Ribisi, who's our villain, with a hilarious Cajun accent, basically threatens him. In the opening of the movie, when Mark Wahlberg's brother-in-law says to Giovanni Ribisi, "I had to dump the shit," him and his buddy walk away, and he's, Mark Wahlberg's brother-in-law is like, oh, kind of relieved, like nothing happened. Then all of a sudden he comes over with a truck and runs the guy over, in his car. I think he's in a car. He runs him over in a car, and he ends up in the hospital. And of course, he tells Mark Wahlberg and his wife, played by Kate Beckinsale, who's the guy's sister, that he fucked up and that he needs to give Giovanni Ribisi some money. Mark Wahlberg says to Giovanni Ribisi, "I'll do one last run," because Mark Wahlberg's character was like the king of smugglers. And he says, "I'll do one last run, I'll pay you back your money, but you leave my family alone." Now, in this movie, you also have Ben Foster, who plays Mark Wahlberg's buddy, and also he's a former smuggler. Halfway through the movie, you find out that Ben Foster is also involved with Giovanni Ribisi, and he's also a bad guy. He's part of this. I mean, that's pretty predictable. It becomes pretty obvious when Ben Foster suggests to Mark Wahlberg that he should smuggle drugs into the country. But what Mark Wahlberg's really going to smuggle is counterfeit money, because counterfeit money is worth something on the street. So, and it's like a typical movie. He gets on this boat to work on the boat, supposedly to make some extra money, but he's going to go to some South American country. They never really say where it was. I think it may have been Costa Rica, maybe? No, not Costa Rica. Venezuela or something. Some South American country. They never say which one it is. And, you know, you get Diego Luna in there, who's going to buy the money from, but the brother-in-law gets coerced into buying drugs instead, so Mark Wahlberg can't pay for the money, so he's got to go with Diego Luna on this heist, and, you know, just one thing leads to another, and you get this one part that kind of really pissed me off a little bit, where Kate Beckinsale gets pushed back, and she hits her head on a bathtub. And for all intents and purposes, she was dead. But at the end of the movie, when Mark Wahlberg is looking for her, he calls her cell phone to find her because she's about to get buried in cement. He finds her body, they get her to a hospital, and then all of a sudden she's alive again. Like nothing happened, even though she on a fucking bathtub. Wouldn't that have killed her? But in the end, she's okay. Alright, I'll go. I guess I can just let that go. I mean, really, Contraband, when it all comes down to it, it's a very typical, I guess you could say, I guess you could say like a heist movie / con movie. I do like how Mark Wahlberg's character actually outsmarted everybody in the end, how he got the money, the counterfeit bills, into the country, how he was able to get Giovanni Ribisi's character caught by the cops. I know the words Mark Wahlberg and outsmart don't really go well together, but it's true. I actually did like how he outsmarts everybody in the end and how he gets the money out of the country. But like I said, it's a very typical movie. Nothing about it pissed me off, but nothing about it really blew me away. It just sort of happens, you know. You go from point A to point B, you know, you pretty much telegraph what's going to happen. I mean, is it worth the watch? Well, that's really up to how you feel about Mark Wahlberg, you know. Like I said, he wasn't horrible in this. It's not like you ever see him picking up a machine gun and going, "Dah!" You know, he never does that. It's mainly just trying to get this counterfeit money, and get it back on this boat, and get back to the U.S. and deal with the situation. That's really it. But like I said, Contraband, it wasn't horrible. It wasn't great, though. It's just, again, it's a really typical movie before, you know. It's really short. It's about like an hour and 25 minutes without the credits. So if you decide you want to check it out, it's, you know, it's like it's over and done like that, and you'll probably forget about it like an hour after you're done watching it because it's really that generic of a film. But again, nothing about it really pissed me off, so I can't really say I hated the movie. All right, so moving on, we're going to go to Safe House with Denzel Washington and Ryan Reynolds. This movie really kind of disappointed me a lot because I was expecting a lot more. It's basically a thriller. You got Denzel Washington playing a CIA agent who has supposedly gone rogue, and he's been captured by the CIA and put to a safe house where Ryan Reynolds is there basically just watching the place, and he's basically bored with his job because all he does is sort of watch the safe house until they bring in Denzel Washington's character. Now, during this the interrogation, it's in the trailer, you know, bad guys come in, and Denzel Washington says, "You got to get me out of here because me they want alive, you they're just going to kill." So Ryan Reynolds takes him, they get out of the place, and they're on the run. And it's really a mediocre movie, hence why it's on the so-so list, because I was really hoping this would be sort of like a buddy action movie, and it really isn't. There isn't any, if you're expecting like jokes or quips or back and forth between the two characters, between Ryan Reynolds and Denzel Washington, you're not going to get it. There's really none of it. In fact, for a big chunk of the movie, I think Denzel Washington, he sort of gets away from Ryan Reynolds, and Ryan Reynolds is sort of scrambling around to figure out how to catch him. And also, if you're expecting action, there's really not that much action at all. There's like one little chase scene that doesn't last very long. A couple little shootouts. I think one little shootout. It's a really forgettable movie too, because like I forgot what happens. And then you got the ending where you find out that I think the guy's name is Brian Gleason or Brandon